Nick Martin, Western Australia's biggest bikie boss, was acquitted for endangering a life in a legal battle with the WA police for lack of evidence. Nick had reportedly punched an associate repeatedly in front of shocked families and children. However, no witnesses were willing to testify, and prosecutors didn't have enough evidence to proceed further. It is no different in the auditing and assurance world. Audit evidence plays a critical role in supporting the opinion provided by an auditor. Ever heard of the phrase, "If it is not documented, it is not done"? It is widely used in the audit and medical field. It basically means that every relevant conversation, observation, inspection, and assessment must be documented. This documentation provides audit evidence that the auditor performed the necessary work before forming a conclusion on the financial statements. ISA 230 requires this audit evidence to be documented on a timely basis and retained by the auditor. This standard requires the following to be documented. Firstly, the record of all audit tests or procedures performed. Secondly, the findings arising after performing those procedures. And finally, the conclusions the auditor reached after performing the procedures. Let's take an example. Wendy, an auditor, discovers significant errors in the client's bank reconciliations for the months of January and June. She also notes that the bank balance as at year-end is materially misstated. What should Wendy document? Firstly, the audit procedure. That is, that she intends to review the bank reconciliations for the months of January and June. Secondly, the audit evidence that the bank reconciliations were not properly performed and point to significant errors in the bank balance. And lastly, the conclusion that based on these findings, the bank balance is materially misstated. The litmus test in preparing audit documentation is to ensure that an experienced auditor who did not perform the audit can pick up the audit file and understand exactly what audit work was performed and the conclusions reached. In summary, the audit file should speak for itself. In addition to supporting the audit opinion, audit documentation serves a lot of other purposes. Firstly, auditors continuously refer to the documentation in the prior year file when planning and executing the current year's audit. Secondly, audit team members can also be held accountable for their work, as working papers must be signed and dated. The audit file can also be used as evidence of work done in the event of disputes, litigations, and claims. Finally, external regulators such as ASIC also review audit files when inspecting audit firms to confirm that the auditor performed adequate work. Once the audit report is signed off, the auditor must ensure that all documentation is correctly filed and that no documents are deleted or discarded from the file before the end of the retention period, which is generally not less than 7 years in Australia. To recap, auditors are required to prepare and retain audit documentation on a timely basis. The audit documentation should include the audit procedures performed by the auditor, the audit evidence gathered from performing those procedures, and the conclusions reached by the auditor based on the evidence gathered. It is this audit evidence that should form the basis for the conclusions reached by the auditor.